Have you ever wondered how things break, crack, split? How? When you cut a piece of paper, one molecule is on one side and the other molecule is on the opposite side. How does that work? Well, I'm going to tell you. Let's start with the first concept, cracks. Cracks are generated by single atoms passing through a crystalline structure, and when two atoms pass each other, they form a void, a crack. Not all cracks are catastrophic. If cracks are kept under their critical crack length, they won't fracture. Think of it this way. In an idealized situation, once an object has crack length A, all pressure that was on the structure parallel to A is released onto the point of the crack. Once the crack becomes larger, maybe due to additional stress on the structure, the crack grows and eventually reaches the critical length, at which point the object sustains the growth of the crack and fractures. In fact, the energy released grows quadratically with the crack length. However, in more ductile materials, which means they can be bent without losing strength, surface tension isn't able to provide an accurate model. Instead, the vast majority of the released strain energy is absorbed not by creating new surfaces, but by plastic flow in the material near the crack tip. Green suggested that catastrophic fracture occurs when the strain energy is released at a rate sufficient to satisfy the needs of all these energy sinks, which are the plastic flow dissipations, and is denoted by the critical strain energy G in the equation. S equals the square root of E times G all over pi times A. This expression describes, in a very succinct way, the interrelation between three important aspects of the fracture process. The material, as evidenced in the critical strain energy release rate G, the stress level S, and the size A of the crack. In a design situation, one might choose a value based on the smallest crack that could be easily detected. Then for a given material with its associated value of G, the safe level of stress could then be determined. The structure would then be sized so as to keep this working stress comfortably below the critical value. But cracks aren't the only problem. We have to think about grain. Who said yeah? Grain is a collection of atoms that have the same crystallographic structure and rotation. Each grain will have its own cleavage plane where the crack will tend to spread. As the crack crosses the boundary between two grains, it must turn or change direction to align itself with the cleavage plane of the new grain. So, the more the crack turns, the more energy it will take to make the crack grow. Therefore, the more material with small grain or material with crack propagating opposite to the grain will be able to absorb more energy before the crack will start to propagate. So when I pull this paper and rip it, the part that absorbed the least amount of energy split. Then the paper followed the split with the largest grain. That is why when you rip a piece of paper, it is roughly straight, since the most force is applied to keeping it straight, but it has slight deviations from grain. Grains are so important, in fact, that they may have accounted in part to the Titanic disaster. The steel used in the Titanic was not pure steel, diluted with carbon and became brittle in the cold waters of the Atlantic. So when the brittle steel hit the iceberg, it cut a much larger gash than if the steel was pure, because pure steel... I hope I've helped you grasp an understanding of how things break and fracture. Grain and cracks are important, and engineers have to take them into account to prevent failures like the Titanic. I'm Tony, thanks for watching.